Welcome to episode 38 of the Search with Candour podcast, recorded on Friday the 29th of November. My name is Mark Williams-Cook, and hooray, I'm joined by Rob again.
Hello.
Today we are going to be talking about optimization score and the traps in Google Ads. So I think this is going to be really, really helpful if you are a small, medium business or you're fairly new to AdWords. And if you're really experienced at AdWords, I think this episode might be quite cathartic for you. So earlier in the year, I was invited by a very nice chap called Joe Glover to speak at one of his events. So Joe runs an event called the Marketing Meetup, and the Marketing Meetup runs all over the UK now, and actually I think I saw he just recently has launched in New York as well. It's a really friendly meetup. It follows the same kind of formula as a lot of the SEO PPC meetups, in that he gets speakers, but he gets them to talk about all aspects of marketing. And Joe asked me, I think it was like the beginning of this year, to come and do a talk to his audience about Google Ads, but specifically for kind of small businesses, people on smaller budgets, that kind of thing, and what would be practical and helpful for them. And I kind of thought, oh wow, firstly it's lucky it's not an advanced thing because I won't have to bug Rob. And I sat down and thought what things would actually really help someone on a smaller budget or just beginning with Google Ads. And where I actually got to with this, and I think it went down really well, was it was basically avoiding the traps that Google Ads lays for you when you set up the accounts. And this is really what we're going to be talking about this episode. So, I mean, at that time I spoke about, so if you set up like a new Google account now, the process is a little bit sort of insidious in that you go through this sort of really, they've repackaged it a few times, because you used to have like AdWords Express, and now you've got like these smart setups. But what they're trying to do basically is get you to opt in and turn on, or leave on I should say, because a lot of them by default certain options. So the things I mentioned were things to watch out for, like when you're being told to put keywords in, as we all know, that the default match type is broad, which means you can put in what you think are some fairly targeted or niche keywords, and actually by default you'll be bidding on all kinds of things, and that falls into this Google approach of broad to narrow. And they sell this on the basis that, hey, we're doing you a favor here because you might miss some opportunities. If you choose some really specific keywords, you might miss out all these other things people are searching for. And this kind of broad to narrow approach is you push towards it in everything, every kind of stage of this setup. So there's things like you'll be by default opted in to the search partner network, and like search partner network, Rob, that's not something generally when you're setting up new accounts, I guess, that you do normally immediately.
No, it really depends on the sector. Typically I want to make sure that a new account has the highest return on investment, so typically I won't automatically opt them in. I'll always opt out. And
we've spoken before about the stuff like the location targeting. Like the default option for that is, or it was always, the people in that location or interested kind of in that location. And you had to go into advanced settings. I wouldn't really class that as an advanced setting to make it just people in that region. And I think we touched on as well how they've changed that again now, actually. So it's just really people that are interested, isn't it? You have to actually exclude countries manually. That's right. Yeah. And then, of course, there's this whole very debatable in value story about all the different automated bidding strategies. So actually, it's quite hard to set up an account now with manual bidding. If you're new to Google Ads, and you try and select manual biddings, you get all these warnings saying, warning, your account performance may be lower with manual bidding.
One of the things that always makes me laugh now is when you set up a campaign and it automatically opts you into the display network for a search campaign. And if you try to opt out, you get a warning message that says, are you sure you don't want to reach millions more people? Of course, to a layman, they'd be like, well, of course I do. I want to reach those people. So they opt in.
I noticed it does the same when you try and opt out for the search partners. I think the message says something along the lines of, it comes up with a little exclamation mark to get you on your toes, and then it says something like, most advertisers opt in to the search partners network. And it's just like, well, of course they do, because you've ticked it by default. It doesn't say on average people make more money or any kind of performance criteria. It just says more people do this. And actually, when you're dealing with bidding environments, competitive bidding environments that are essentially zero-sum games, it doesn't actually pay to do what everyone else is doing. A lot of the times, the most effective strategy is actually to do things slightly differently, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So what we actually want to talk about is, drumroll, optimization score. So optimization score, so wasn't actually around for the longest time. So the longest time when I managed, as it was, Google AdWords account, we didn't have optimization score, but it's something that has come in now, and I've noticed it's creeping more and more to the forefront of the Google Ads kind of platform. And I've seen lots of people, I know there's lots of frustration in the Google kind of ads manager agency community about this optimization score. So do you want to take us through, Rob, start, what is optimization score, where do you see it, and what is it, what does it do?
Sure, okay. Well, optimization score really has been around since last year, since around 2018, when Google started pushing the recommendations tab. And I'm sure most advertisers that work in Google Ads have seen the recommendations tab by now. It's essentially what it suggests. It's a tab that highlights recommendations that Google is suggesting that you apply to your account, along with various issues or fixes it thinks it has found on your account. And inside the recommendations tab, Google will include this optimization score, which is a percentage figure, obviously between 0 and 100%. And the way it works, the more Google recommendations or fixes that you apply from the recommendations tab, the higher the optimization score will increase. So I noticed the other month that Google's quietly been rolling out optimization score as a default metric in some Google Ads accounts. So for some advertisers, they will log into their Google Ads account, and the first thing they will see in there next to their clicks and impressions is a new tab now, a new column that says optimization score, which could obviously be anywhere between 0% and 100%.
So that's, when you say default metric, you mean that's actually just on the default table view of Google Ads?
Yeah, so I mean, I have lots of custom built columns that I use for every advertiser that I preset, that are saved for each account, and I found that they snuck their way into my saved columns. Like, what is this?
Oh, really? The custom ones as
absolutely,
well?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So people are probably going to become a lot more aware of optimization score because of that. And before optimization score was a thing, Google account managers and agency liaison staff at Google would have a similar process, I guess, to the recommendations tab, where they would analyze an account and they would work with you and speak with you and highlight things that they thought were missing from the account, or new initiatives that they'd been working on at Google that they'd released that you weren't trialing. They would call you up every month or so, or email you regularly to say, hey, we've noticed you've not trialed this out yet. So in my opinion, the recommendations tab and optimization score is, I guess it's a stage up from that, where it takes a lot of the pressure off Google staff to try and push you to use these new initiatives.
So is it before, would you say, the account managers at Google were more manually looking at the account and then going through?
There was an element of that, but they also had a Google Sheets system that would scour the account and highlight things in red that were missing, and give you they would give you an agency score as well, and tell you how you compare to other agencies in terms of usage. And I'm sure they probably had a very similar thing as well for advertisers that didn't work with an agency but had an in-house team working on the pay-per-click account. But going back to optimization score, everyone loves or hates a vanity metric, and in my opinion, optimization score is a vanity metric. So people logging into their accounts and they see a low optimization score, many advertisers will want that score to say 100% because they see it, I guess, as a reflection of their optimization abilities.
Well, it is called optimization score.
Exactly. So with a simple click of a button or two, that percentage can increase. But the main question is, what is optimization score? Well, just to be annoying, I'm going to tell you what it is not. It is not quality score. So it's not a metric that influences your ad rank in any way, shape or form. It's just a metric whose primary purpose is to highlight campaign opportunities, potential account repairs, or highlight missing elements of a campaign that may or may not help to improve your performance. So I guess the easiest way to get a handle of how optimization score works is to just navigate to the recommendations tab and have a look at the things. First of all, have a look at your optimization score and see what recommendations Google is suggesting you apply to increase it. If you hover your mouse over the optimization score metric, a little message appears from Google explaining what it is. And I'm just going to read it out here. It says, your optimization score is an estimate of how well your account is set to perform. Apply the recommendations below to help your campaigns perform better and raise your optimization score. So by looking through the various recommendations that Google provides, you'll see that it applies a score uplift if you apply the respective recommendation.
So it's literally just based on when you click on those things and they're done. It's not based on any type of feedback of performance.
No. So in theory, if you were to apply every recommendation in the recommendations tab, your optimization score could increase to 100%, although it can actually get higher than 100% depending on what you've applied beforehand. But interestingly, if you dismiss a recommendation, that will also increase your optimization score because that recommendation no longer exists. So if your optimization score was 80% and Google said if you double your budget, you'll get an optimization score uplift of 20%, if you decide not to apply that and you just dismiss it, your optimization score would still go up by 20%.
If only work worked like that.
Exactly, yeah. Just press no.
just
keep pressing no.
Just dismiss those tasks you gave me.
Yeah.
So,
but actually, it's funny that you should say that because just as scarily and equally, you could just press yes all the time, as I'm sure people have when they've gone into the recommendations tab. Say, oh, I want some of that 100%. Yes, apply. So if you're really bothered about the optimization score and the figure it's showing you, and you don't want it to be lower than 100%, you can literally just press dismiss to everything, and the recommendations will disappear, and you'll have a nice shiny 100% optimization score.
How does this fit in though? Because I've seen a lot of the frustration around optimization score be around the Google account managers. So the account managers are the people that will be assigned to work with those running Google Ads accounts, which will be both agencies and clients directly. And from what I've heard people complain about is the pressure they've been under essentially to apply all of the things on those optimization score.
And as a manager myself, I am often under pressure by clients. I tried to be good today. I tried to start off with the benefits of the recommendations tab, but you've swayed me into the dangers of the recommendations tab. So I'm going to have to start with the dangers. But I think the biggest danger to advertisers who don't question the recommendations, that's the biggest danger, those that just click on apply. Because as you say, they're under pressure from the advertiser to have this 100% optimization score, which actually has nothing to do with business performance, KPIs, or any real actual optimization. And interestingly, if you look at the recommendations that provide the biggest uplift, they're always one of two things: budget and bid strategy. So if you want to get the biggest increase to optimization score, Google says increase your spend. Well, that's got nothing to do with optimization. I could spend thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds more per day and not actually get anything out of it other than wasted spend and lower profits. So there is an argument there that Google isn't really looking at your best interests for a lot of the score. Now, interestingly, there are some really positive things that the recommendation tab will also highlight, such as missing site link extensions, negative keywords that are stopping campaigns from running. Now, those things provide the lowest optimization score uplift, but in my opinion, they're the things that influence business performance and can help increase conversion. So it's interesting that it puts a lot of its influence to optimization score on spend. So I guess the cynics among us would say that optimization score is there, I guess, for Google to help hit its business targets. But of course, there are very positive things about the recommendations tab. I
mean, the spend thing can fall into that broad to narrow narrative of if you have low spend, too much of it will be going to sort of your core, if you like, keywords. And if you do have a strategy that's relying on, say, broad match rather than doing the narrow to broad thing of specifying exact or closed variant matches to force budget into them, that you might miss out. So I can see how if you followed their recipe of organizing the account, it would certainly cost you more.
Yes.
But I can see how they would explain that in terms of you need to spend more, because otherwise it's just going to go on these keywords and you're missing out on all these. Look what you could have won.
Well, it's interesting. I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent now. I beg your pardon. But Google recently removed the ability to change your budget delivery settings. Most of my campaigns used to be set to accelerated, but occasionally I'd set them to standard. And that was often a recommendation in the tab. It was always remove your budget delivery from accelerated and put it to standard because we know best. Now, what I've found is that since they've removed accelerated delivery, all of my budgets, when I have a limited budget, they're not being spread evenly throughout the day. They're always being used up really early on in the morning now. So Google should actually be looking at that and spreading it throughout the day, but it's not. And what I'm finding more and more is the recommendations tab is telling me that I need to increase my budget because I'm missing out on people during the day. Just thought that was an interesting thing to think about there.
I'd love to hear if anyone else has that same experience as well, because the Google Ads training documentation that Google gives was quite specific around how they spent budgets in terms of accelerated and standard delivery. And the idea behind standard delivery was they would spread out your budget to last you across the day.
But now I'm finding that I come into work in the morning sometimes and my budgets are spent already and I don't have the option of...
And you get in really early.
I get in very early. Not as early as you, though. Now, you mentioned earlier about how this impacts the actual pay-per-click manager. And I have to say, I think there's another danger here, which is that the recommendations tab or optimization score can cause distrust among clients and their pay-per-click managers, or employers and their in-house pay-per-click employees who they've employed to have the pay-per-click expertise and manage the account. And I think there's a danger that if top-level decision makers in business who don't have much experience with Google Ads, if they log in and they see a low optimization score, they might question the skills of the person managing the account. Those who actually know what they're doing. And I was like, well, why is the optimization score only 60%? Why have you not applied these recommendations? Apparently, you're missing out on lots of traffic because you haven't pressed the apply button. What am I paying you for? I can do this myself.
Well, I've actually seen now 2 cases where an agency has reported that their Google account manager has directly contacted the client about the agency not implementing their suggestions that came from optimization score. So they phoned up the client and said, hey, we're trying to get the best for your account and your agency hasn't applied this, this and this, and we told them to for best performance. Which obviously, if that happened to us, I'd be pretty mad.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, Google will prefer advertisers to go for the broadest advertising approach first.
So I think that's something maybe to those who are listening that are running paid search accounts or have someone doing it for them, do bear this in mind about optimization score and take that, certainly with minimally, we can say at the moment, with a pinch of salt, and listen to the person that's doing it for you.
Because even though it has the word optimization in it, it doesn't actually really reflect the optimization of the account or your business objectives or strategy. I think that's probably the most important thing to consider. And actually going back to accelerated delivery being removed as an option, I wonder if the recommendations tab is partially used by Google as a research exercise to see why there is low uptake for certain tools. And because when you dismiss a recommendation, you can actually give your reason why. So that's invaluable information for Google, and one of the options is, I don't think that this will improve performance. Now, if enough people press that, Google then has a decision to make. Does it just do away with that entirely if no one's using it? Or does it make people have to use it by removing it as an option, such as the case of the budget delivery option?
I mean, I've found it useful sometimes. So there are some useful things for the optimization score. So I think one of the most helpful ones is when you are running big campaigns, lots of ads, is when you've missed or there's a new opportunity for things like different types of ad extensions, because it can be really difficult sometimes to manage which ad extensions are appropriate and keeping track of which ones are and aren't applied. Right?
Exactly. And if you're really knee deep in optimization and you're carrying out requests from the client, or there's been a huge campaign you've been working on, it's very easy to sometimes lose sight of a specific tiny little thing that has been used across the entire account but is missing on one campaign. The recommendations tab is great for highlighting that. And it's good for little quick wins and just tidying up the account and finding potential issues. So yeah, absolutely, it's always a good thing to look at in case there is something obvious that's missing from the account.
So do you think we're still quite far away from someone new being able to run a Google Ads campaign through the advice you're getting in the optimization score recommendations tab?
I would definitely say so, yes. I mean, you used the example earlier of the sort of smart express setup that they used to use. It's interesting because I think a campaign is most likely to fail for a new business who's just dipping their toes into Google Ads for the first time if they go through that setup process. And they're going to potentially spend $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, and eventually going to say, well, it's not doing anything. So Google Ads just doesn't work. In my mind, it makes sense to go in slowly, see results, and then expand. So I'm curious as to why Google has taken this approach personally. But
I mean, I've had discussions with a few people about this, and I personally think it does partly have to do with if Google had the default setup, say, to closed variant for when you put keywords in. I do think not enough people that are new, which I imagine still makes a significant proportion of the Google Ads population, understand that much about how those keyword matching options are working, and they probably would just type in a few keywords. And we know that the long tail does make up the majority of searches, so we need to use some kind of matching to find them. And secondly, I think it is beneficial for Google in terms that if everyone took this, say, efficient narrow to broad approach of, okay, we'll start with some closed variant with some phrase match, and we'll slowly expand, and we'll keep wastage to a minimum, and we'll put things that work into their own campaigns and drive maximum budget to them. What would happen, I think, is all of these keywords are going to approach an equilibrium for what they're worth and be fairly static. Whereas if you've got lots of new companies turning their hand to Google Ads and using automated bidding strategies, using broad match, a lot of people will pay over the odds to begin with, or will raise the price on maybe keywords that aren't worth that much, and that impacts everyone, the whole ecosystem, because as soon as someone starts rocking the boat and putting prices up, prices go up for everyone, and then everyone's in the and then all the sort of automated stuff kicks in, and I'm sure some people their account cost per click will creep up above what's really acceptable, and then, like you say, those people will fall by the wayside and say, oh, Google Ads doesn't work, and they'll stop, and then the price per click isn't instantly going to drop back down. There's going to be sort of momentum as it goes back down. So I think it's people entering into Google Ads making a splash is kind of beneficial in terms of profit.
Yeah, it's funny actually, riding on those trends. It makes me think of when I first started learning pay-per-click on Google Ads or AdWords. It was around about the time where advertisers had learned that it was much better to bid on the long tail niche keywords because A, they were cheaper, and B, they converted higher. And after a while, the cost per click on those terms started getting high. So I got to the point where I thought, well, I want to try out these broader keywords that people used to bid on because they're cheaper. Maybe even though they convert lower, fewer people are now bidding on them. So for quite a long time, I rode on the rave of people not actually bidding on those really broad terms, and I had really good success for a while. And then it balanced out, as you said, and the trends changed, and people started doing that again, and the cost per click lowered on the longer tail terms, and then they increased again on the broad terms, and it did kind of balance itself out. But what I have found is that since there's been this huge push for automated machine learning bidding or smart bidding strategies, that the cost per click has been getting higher. Now, I can't obviously attribute it to that, but the Google Ads cost per click has got significantly higher in the past 12 months. And if more and more advertisers have a maximize clicks bidding strategy, then surely someone's going to bid for a higher position. The machine learning is going to say, well, you've chosen to have maximize clicks, so we're going to increase your bids. And then everyone's bids are going to increase if they're not setting caps in place. So there's no human control in place monitoring the average cost per click, as you say. There's not an equilibrium in place. It's potentially going to get higher.
Well, I guess it'll find an equilibrium much faster, which means the costs won't creep up as people bounce backwards and forward, manually adjusting things. The machine will play each other, or play itself, because it's all one machine. But it would take, my guess would be, it would take the cost per click much faster to the acceptable maximum where people will keep paying, basically.
Time will tell.
But we essentially covered what we said right near the beginning there about sometimes it's advantageous to do things other people aren't doing in these bidding environments. Like when you said there was that trend where everyone kind of went a bit more long tail and the prices went up, and now it's kind of settled where, if you look at terms like car insurance, they may well be cheaper than something like, buy car insurance online because it's got a higher intent term, and we all know that they're valuable. So have you got any closing kind of recommendations for those people in Google Ads about optimization score that are maybe getting started?
Take it with a pinch of salt, which I think is something I have said on every single podcast I've ever done with you, Mark. So I'm getting bored of hearing myself say it. I
think it's more than a pinch, though, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's like
a couple of tablespoons.
At least a palmful of salt.
Too much salt's bad for you, but in this case, I think the more salt, the better. Just, look at the recommendations tab and decide whether the recommendations it's suggesting are relevant. Just this morning, I looked in the recommendations tab before this podcast, actually, and one of them was add 100 new keywords for an uplift of 10% optimization score. And I looked at the keywords and they just were not relevant at all. So just have a look and just, you know your account, your business, your sector. Google does not.
And I guess my throw in for that would be, if you're the person not managing the account and you are looking in, talk to the person that is actually managing it before you come to any conclusion about how well they're doing their job based on this number that we know isn't directly related to performance.
Absolutely.
That's all we've got time for. We've been about half an hour again already. Goes quick, huh?
It does.
And we will see you in 1 week's time, going into December, so post Black Friday, coming up to Christmas. Have a great week.
Goodbye.